Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Nerds of the North podcast. Episode number 32. 32 episodes written down in the analogs of history. So here we go.
History.
Yeah. Today, we're going to be talking about the most recent episode of Hawkeye, episode number 5. 5 of 6. It's kind of hard to believe that episode is already coming to a close. But as always, I'm host number 1, Matt, and joining me as always is host number 2,
Nick.
And so we're going to use this episode to talk about the 5th episode of Hawkeye. Obviously, I think we're also going to try and use this as a method of discussing the other Netflix MCU involved series that haven't officially been confirmed, with one exception that we'll get into, trying to avoid any spoilers or anything for anyone early on in the episode. But we'll start off just talking about the episode, kind of our thoughts and feelings on the matter, and then just move in from the conversation from there. So, Nick, how did you feel about this 5th episode?
I just want to make 2 things clear before I launch into my very in-depth review of this episode of Hawkeye.
Very in-depth, sure.
When I said annals of history, I purposefully mispronounced that. So in the comment section, please don't say I pronounced that incorrectly, because that was purposeful.
I mean, we do have a really wildly populated comment section, so I think it's really important that you make that distinction.
And then secondly, just to talk about the elephant in the room right now. Yes, the picture behind me is straight, if you take a quick look at it, because that's been a huge topic of debate amongst the fan base, whether my picture was straight in the background or whether it was a camera angle. And I think it's still a little bit we don't really know for sure at this point. I can't tell when I look at it in the room itself, but
I mean, I think it's inappropriate to assume your picture's orientation. I think it's only fair to ask its orientation and to make sure that, you know, we're not assuming anyone's orientation without proper context.
Yeah, though I don't really think you should ask someone what their orientation is either. I feel
is that a little too aggressive?
Or a picture. You shouldn't ask a picture what their orientation is. Sorry, the real elephant in the room, I think, is Spider-Man No Way Home, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're on. It's No Way Home. Yes.
Yep, that film is released. One of us has seen that. Raise your hand if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home.
I wish I could move my hand over here. No, I have seen it. Yes, I have seen that.
But I haven't been able to see it yet. I will be seeing it this coming week, so that will be the topic of discussion, I'm sure, probably for most of next week's episode.
And I guess that I'll just give a non-spoiler first impression real fast. I think that might be an interesting topic of discussion.
Sure, please.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. There's a lot of stuff about it. When I was watching it, I think there's parts of it I was a little underwhelmed. But the more I thought about it, the more I ended up liking it quite a bit. I think it was definitely a very solid entry into the Spider-Man canon and also the Marvel Cinematic canon, and definitely sets up a really interesting storyline going forward with Tom Holland's Spider-Man if he chooses to stay.
Sure.
So I look forward to having a discussion with you about that film. But I thought the best things about it were Tom Holland's performance, Willem Dafoe's performance, which is not a spoiler because we
know he's in it.
He's in it. And also I think the emotional arc of Tom Holland's Spider-Man through the movie, even though there's a bunch of multiverse things going on, was really strong, which I think that easily could have gotten lost in the spectacle, which it didn't. So there's my first impressions, my initial spoiler-free thoughts of the new Spider-Man movie, which came out on Friday in the US.
Cool. I really look forward to see this movie. I've been a big fan of Tom Holland as Spider-Man so far in the MCU films. and the Sony created Spider-Man movies that they have done have also been really, really good. But I will argue that they've only been good because of Disney, Marvel, and like maybe more specifically Kevin Feige's involvement in the movies. That being Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man
Far From Home.
Far From Home. Thank you. So those are both really excellent films. So I look forward and have high expectations of No Way Home to meet those expectations. Plus all of the additional craziness that we've all been seeing. Yeah, the fact that we're getting past Spider-Man villains, the actors returning to reprise their roles, Jesus, what, 10 years after the fact, I think is really, really cool.
I mean, 20 years almost in Willem Dafoe's case.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Willem Dafoe is a fantastic actor.
He's barely aged a day. In fact, in some ways, he looks better now than he did back then.
I feel like he's kind of got one of those faces, like, he's kind of up there in the same echelon as what's his face, Patrick Stewart, for example. And that like he hit his final form like early on in life and just like hasn't aged a day since then, except with Willem Dafoe, it's the same case, except he just looks like he's been ravaged by a grizzly bear in advance.
Yeah.
But that was his final form.
There is some weird cases of actors that are like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm pretty sure Morgan Freeman has been the same age since I was a child.
Yeah, right. I know, right?
I don't think that man has aged it. Well, I actually haven't seen him in any movies for a while, to be clear. So maybe he's aged a lot.
Movies recently. I feel like one of the more recent interviews I saw him in, it was just an interview, but like, I mean, he looked older, but like not in the way that you traditionally think that like, wow, someone's aged up. It's just more of like, oh, he's a little gray by comparison,
Yeah. He didn't have that Brendan Fraser transition. Have you seen him these days?
I mean, I would only argue that he might be a bad example of this, only in that like Brendan Fraser has been through a tremendous amount of stress and like legal action from the time that we saw him in like the Mummy movies to now.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Brendan Fraser. I just was kind of the initial shock of seeing him these days. I was kind of
no, for sure. He does look a lot different than what you like. For anyone like who is aware of Brendan Fraser, at least from in their periphery, might be surprised to see what he looks like now in comparison to what he looked like then. Yeah, because like I was a huge fan of Brendan Fraser back in the day. Like I loved the Mummy movies, with the exception of the I guess the third installment of the Mummy franchise. I like the Mummy Returns. I still don't think I've actually done a full like viewing of the third Mummy movie, where his son magically ages up like 10 years.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters, but they recast Rachel Weisz's character, which
his wife
wasn't a great choice, I don't think. But then they made that Tom Cruise the Mummy, which this is what we're talking about there. Like he
looks very different. Yeah, like and I think that's certainly indicative of the types of stresses he's been dealing with over the last 20 years.
Well, I think this is how people age.
Yeah.
In general, like most Hollywood, like if Hollywood actors were real people and they actually aged like a normal person, this is how most of them would probably look.
No, you're not wrong.
It's more weird that they don't look like this as they get older.
It actually kind of reminds me of of a conversation. This is like so off the rails for what we're going to talk about, but it does remind me of a conversation I've been hearing about, specifically with Angelina Jolie and the one of the movie posters that was put out for Eternals that came out.
Are we talking about her boobs?
Yes, yes. Like what? she's not a young woman anymore. Like Angelina Jolie, by like most standards, is still a beautiful woman, but she's not a young woman anymore. Like, and that's fine. You can be beautiful and older. It doesn't mean you can't be beautiful, but there are effects of aging just as time goes by. And one of the Eternals posters that came out has Angelina Jolie's character, like, you know, full frame, like right in front, like in the foreground, but she's still very prominently displayed. And she just has, this isn't even like a part of her normal character's attire in the movie. Like her armor, her costume, whatever you want to call it, is like normally like form fitting, but in a way that feels pretty natural. Whereas the movie poster has, yes, like these perfectly formed spheres of boobs that are on her character. Like that is not the way it looks in the movie at all. Why the shit did the person who made this poster, or the group of people that made this poster, decide this is how she should be represented on this poster? Like,
well, I did hear something weird. I don't remember. It was one of the articles I read about Eternals, that a lot of their outfits were actually done in post-production. So
sure.
Angelina Jolie's outfit, hers apparently was completely done in post-production. Mm-hmm. So every time you see her in the movie, her body is essentially CGI, I think.
Which that's fine, but it still doesn't look anything like the costume that's in this poster.
I just think, honestly, when I look, I'm looking at this lady's chest. World.
I mean, we're talking about this lady's boobs. Like that's the point of conversation.
To me, they look weirdly drawn. They look kind of weirdly drawn on. It's like they're not. But it looks unnatural, and that's the most I'll say about it. It doesn't look right. Like you compare her down here with like Salma Hayek. That looks natural. Like, well, up here it looks like it's like a drawing, a bad drawing of her body.
Well, like even if you like make a comparison between Salma Hayek's and then our other main actress in that film, it's been a hot minute since I've seen Eternals now, but the woman to Salma Hayek's left in this poster in the green costume,
Cersei, I think.
Cersei, yeah, like her costume, even like the way that it just forms around her body makes more sense. Like Angelina Jolie's costume in this poster just looks like it was sprayed onto her body. Like it's literally like a body paint versus like an actual costume or uniform or anything. And I don't know why they went with that, why they chose that as for this poster. It just seems so, none of the other women are that highly sexualized in this movie poster. But Angelina Jolie, though, like her tits have to be perfect, apparently, in this movie poster.
Yeah, it's hard to say what kind of thought process went into that. Maybe there was some back scene stuff where Angelina has something in her contract where her boobs have to look really nice.
Maybe, I don't know. Like just as a guy, the first time I saw this poster, my initial reaction to this was like, oh, this is it's a pretty stereotypical poster. And then just like 2 seconds of observation, and I was like, what is happening? That is not how fabric works. I'm sorry. Like it's so wildly not how.
In a way, though, it's kind of comic book accurate, because a lot of the stuff they put on women in comics
Oh yeah.
It's not
But
natural.
I think that's more of a condemnation of how like costumes and comic books work versus like
Yeah.
Angelina Jolie's form. Like she's an older woman now, but that doesn't mean she doesn't still have like a form fit body. She's in way better shape than I am for comparison. Like, but that doesn't mean that
Oh,
she's still.
Matt, don't sell yourself short.
I am so gonna solve. I am drinking while we're recording this shit. Like, I am not in as good a shape as Angelina Jolie. I'm not even gonna pretend like that's the case.
I don't
But
know. I mean, get you and her into a room. I can judge then. It's kind of hard to.
yeah, get us two in a room together, and I will tell her, why are we doing this? I would ask her that question. Like, first off, it's great to meet you. This is a really wild occasion. Why are we in the same pony race? Like,
Um,
but this is so wildly off the rails. I guess we should probably talk about the Hawkeye.
yeah. Here, I'll stop sharing. I guess the last thing I just wanted to say, man, I was gonna say one last thing about Spider-Man before we
Oh
move
yeah,
on to the
please.
next topic. And I remember now. And I guess I already kind of touched on this. I don't know how necessary it is, but I do think that at the end of this movie, he's the most like Tom Holland is the most like Spider-Man that he's ever been in the MCU before, because that has been a criticism levied against the MCU's version of Spider-Man. He just doesn't really seem Spider-Man like. You never really see him swinging through New York City, at least in the first two movies, barely at all. He has a lot of Stark tech. He was a member of the Avengers almost before he was like really Spider-Man that you think of when you think of
Sure.
Spider-Man.
You're like a
So
full-fledged Spider-Man, yeah. That's
yeah,
fair.
so this movie definitely puts him in a position where you feel like he is going to be that version of Spider-Man that basically the world knows and loves. So
Okay. Sure.
yeah. So that's one thing to look forward to. I think I actually really liked Far From Home when I saw it, but this movie definitely I think is gonna have a really big rewatch factor. I could rewatch this one again.
Ooh, that's fun. I like that. I look forward to seeing it. I look forward to discussing it. I don't actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if we'll get an episode out next Saturday exactly, because that is Christmas Day.
Oh, that's
But
true.
so we might have an episode
Well, I
later
mean,
or
do you
earlier.
have a plan on seeing it anytime soon?
Yeah, I definitely am going to be seeing it this coming week.
I mean, maybe if you have time, because I have all week next week off. So
That's right. Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, yeah, that might work out well because after Christmas won't work out super well necessarily because I have my sister is going to be coming into town. So
Nice. I was just gonna say, I apologize to our audience. I know you guys always want to see how the sausage is made, and we're making the sausage right now, right in front
right
of you.
now, yep, right now. That
Yeah.
phrase isn't weird at all in this context. But okay, so Spider-Man, Angelina Jolie's boobs and movie posters and Eternals.
And Brendan Fraser.
And Brendan Fraser. So now we're moving on to the piece de resistance, the Hawkeye discussion. I would say personally that yeah, I think yeah, the comment you made earlier on is that like the show just keeps getting better as time goes on, as things keep layering and characters keep getting more, like we keep getting background and more information about everything. But yeah, like I think the show has improved tremendously from its first episode, and from a like non-spoilery point, this episode definitely like builds so much on a lot of the characters, and I think that it builds on Kate really well. I think it builds on Clint really well. We get a lot of cool action sequences in this episode. And we even get like a lot more background and just development and like continued development on Echo, I believe is her name. Like just a really solid episode all around. And it does, for me, I do really wish that we could get more episodes of this show. I think 6 episodes just isn't and will not be enough for me. I want more, or I want more buildup, but I'm a huge fan of this episode. Yeah, like I think it turned out really well, and the big reveal at the end of the episode did a tremendous amount to make me really hyped for further episodes and just for more Marvel stuff moving forward.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I think the other thing that I thought they did pretty well this episode, I thought the scene with Yelena, actually every scene with Yelena I thought was really strong. I know I made a comment last week that she wasn't as talkative as I remembered her from being in the ScarJo movie Black Widow, but this one she was exactly as I remembered her from that film. She was really funny. She that scene with her basically going into the ex Black Widow's house or whatever. I mean, that was pretty good. It was kind of fun to see that another blip episode. But especially the scene with Kate Bishop and her, I thought was really strong. I think both those actresses have a lot of charisma, so it just really worked. And I thought the scene was well written too, which was good. What else did I like in this episode? I mean, Kate's mom, I can't remember her name in the show right now, and I should. It was pretty well telegraphed, I thought, early on that she was going to be one of the main villains in the show, and that really does seem to be playing itself out.
Yeah.
What else did I like? The battle on the rooftop was pretty good. No, wait, that was from last episode. Crap.
It was. I mean, but it like that. I don't think we really touched on that in the last episode, though. I mean, that fight was really cool, and I do think they did a really good job of introducing of Elena. And yeah, like I think you were right in that she wasn't initially like introduced in a way that was, I don't know, like indicative of her character necessarily. But now that we've had this 5th episode, it certainly does do a better job, I think, of introducing her as a character and like really putting her flavor and spin on like how she approaches problems and why she's there in the first place.
Yeah. I will say this though, as far as her motivations for going after Clint, I don't really 100% understand her reasoning. And I'm just wondering, like, maybe there's something more that we don't know about Clint, because everything I've seen of him, he seems like his morals, I don't know. I've never seen him do anything outright unforgivable. And it's not like what's her name, Yelena, really knows what happened on Vormir, and neither does Valentina. So to me, it's just kind of weird.
Didn't she bring up specifically that at the end of Black Widow that Clint killed Black Widow? Like, wasn't that something that Julie Louis-Dreyfus brought up specifically?
Yeah, Valentina. I think her name's Valentina.
Yeah, which like wasn't something that.
Well, I think she's, and this is all from memory, I think she said the person responsible for your sister's death.
Yeah. Which is definitely like, I guess it's kind of, if you haven't seen the Black Widow movie, wouldn't make a ton of sense, right? Like,
I still don't really think it makes a ton of sense, because it really wasn't his fault. Nothing was his fault in that regard.
Like, no, well, but I think that's more of like, it's more of setting up Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character, you know. I feel kind of bad, like, always calling her by her real name in this context. Because I quite frankly, I don't remember her name, like, as a villain.
I think it's Valentina something.
Yeah, Valentina. Like, she has a full name that, like, I have a hard time remembering. But
I think that being said,
she like she is 100% being set up as a villain. At least in the eyes of the audience, like, broadly. And that's fine. But if the context isn't there for someone who's watching the show, and I mean, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't. How much background you need to understand Like what's happening in Hawkeye. If
Well,
you
there were several other comments she made though, where I just didn't really connect with why she was saying that. She's like, "Well, do you know
Mhm.
Clint? How long have you known Clint?" This was Valentina. Sorry, not Valentina. This was Yelena to Kate,
Sure. Hmm.
and she's like, "Oh, I've known him like a week." But I'm like, "Does Yelena really know Clint?" So I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like it does. The relationship between Clinton um and Natasha is set up as one to like to be pretty intimate, in that Natasha's been very involved in Clint's family. But like I don't really think that went both ways though. Like Clint's family knows Natasha, like they know her as like Auntie Natasha, right? Or Auntie Nat. But I don't think Clint knows anything about Natasha's family.
Well, for what
Natasha
it's,
barely knew
yeah,
anything
that's what I was
about
gonna say. I
Natasha's
don't really
family.
think
Yeah.
Natasha,
Like,
like, she really wasn't involved with that, or it didn't even really like seem that she necessarily even was 100% on board considering them family, even at least
and
initially at the beginning of Black Widow. Maybe by the end she was, but
and like I guess that's fine, but Clint does show in that he knows who Elena is, which is kind of interesting. A lot of development probably happened there, in that Natasha told Clint about her time spent with her family, um,
yeah,
after Civil War, but before the events of the final movies of that saga. Um, but it's not like he would know Elena personally,
yeah. I
which
guess just
does.
from a pure storytelling perspective, I like Yelena as a character and I like Clint as a character.
Mhm.
I just don't understand the beef necessarily. Like I understand that Yelena is being used for some reason to go after Clint, and we don't really know why yet. But I feel like it's making Yelena look kind of bad just because there's just nothing that we've seen as an audience so far that would justify her beliefs about Clint.
I think it's literally only been Valentina's information that she's working off of. You know,
Yeah. Which I didn't think that Valentina was necessarily the most trustworthy individual to be, even for a character like Yelena. Like, I don't think she would necessarily want to trust someone like that. But I kind of
Mhm.
feel like we don't really know the whole story yet, so I'll hold off on my judgment on the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think it's a fair thing to be critical of at this point, like because my one my thing that I was gonna say is that I guess to be fair, Yelena at this point she's pretty fresh to the world. Like she's only been recently uh, not indoctrinated by the Black Widow group, by the Red Room and the like the things they did to them there to make them subservient. So maybe it's playing off of more of the notion that she's still pretty um naive in these regards, or maybe just a little too trusting, and that she's so fresh to the world. um and like she really didn't have that much time in the world before she was blipped. 5 years have passed. She didn't know that her sister had died during that time. Maybe she's just looking for purpose still, and like that seems like a pretty reasonable thing. And that she became incredibly close with her sister much later on in her life, very quickly after she'd been unindoctrinated. And then she was led to believe that her sister was killed by this person whom Yelena knows literally nothing about, other than that, like they worked together and he killed her. So she maybe doesn't have much reason to not believe what she's told. But I do agree that it seems like kind of a weak it seems like a weak starting point for her, because we know Clint. We don't know exactly what Clint did during his time as Ronin. not in its entirety or anything too specific. We only know that he killed a lot of people as Ronin, but we also know that he killed a lot of bad guys as Ronin. Not really anyone that would necessarily be considered innocent by any stretch of the imagination. And the Marvel heroes, as we know them, aren't really afraid to kill people. Like, they do kill people on a pretty regular basis.
Which is something that is expanded upon in Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man movie.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess Ronan, he did kill, for example, Echo's father, it seems. And so he didn't
Yes.
really leave much room for gray in his worldview. So in that regard, I will say that that's a little unforgivable.
Sure.
And this is just something that I'm coming up with right now, because I kind of agree. I agree with you. Yeah, he killed bad people, but just because you're doing a crime doesn't necessarily mean that you're not forgivable.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a huge motif with this show in general,
Yeah.
is that like Ronin did kill bad people, but he also killed bad people on Earth specifically during a time when there weren't even that many people, period, bad versus good at all, left on planet Earth. And like, does that excuse him necessarily? Like, he lost his family to the blip. So does that give him permission to just murder bad guys one way or the other outright? I don't necessarily think so, and I think he recognizes that. I think Clint recognizes that, in that he doesn't want anyone to know that he was Ronin. You know, like who was it that was saying that? It was Yelena, like saying that he wants to protect his reputation, and she's not wrong. Like, I don't think she's wrong in saying that to Kate.
See, I kind of didn't understand that line, because to me, from everything I've seen from about Hawkeye, he doesn't care about his reputation. What he cares about is protecting his family.
I mean, I think the two, I think those views mesh in that his reputation is linked to how protected his family is, right? Like,
I don't know. Is it?
like, I would kind of think so, because like, as long as, because I have no idea what kind of knowledge, because at this point, like, it's clear that Clint is still either working for Shield or at least is a government agent in some way. But we don't really know how known is it that Clint was Ronin.
It's not
Like,
well known at all. It doesn't seem it. I mean, I think if anything, that's what he's trying to protect the most, is that linking of him and Ronan together.
and so would his like government paycheck still keep coming in if people knew he was Ronin, if he wasn't
Well,
an
I just don't even
Avenger
know
anymore?
if is he part of the government? I don't know. I don't know if that's been established.
I mean, he's getting paid still, right? Like, he's receiving money to do things.
I mean, I don't. It's not like we've seen him get a check in the mail. Oh, we
No,
know.
but
Maybe
it's
he's
kind of
getting money
assumed.
from like the Stark organization or something. I mean,
Maybe, like, I don't know, but like, I would kind of assume he's still a part of the newly, like the new Shield, the non
well, that's the
Hydra
thing too. Is
related
like
Shield.
Shield's not really around anymore either. So we don't really know, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But
No,
I guess
and I don't. Then I'm just not really necessarily playing devil's advocate, but just arguing that, like, I think that the conversation about like Clint's reputation as Hawkeye versus Ronin does play into his ability to protect his family. Because if no one knows he's Ronin and he's still, operating under the assumption that everyone knows him as Hawkeye, if he were to be found out as Ronin, I don't necessarily, his family would be put in danger as a result of that.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah,
I just
can
think
see your
that,
point.
so I think that like there's an argument to be had there that like Clint might not necessarily see it as protecting his reputation as protecting his family. But I think it could be argued that Yelena isn't wrong in her assumption of Clint, but it's just for different reasons. She sees it as protecting his reputation, but he sees it as protecting his family.
Yeah, I can see your point.
That's kind of where I'm coming from. But
yeah, I mean, and the show has pointed out he has a branding issue, so it's probably linked up with that idea as well. I guess another thing I was going to point out, I do like how these shows, and when I say that, I'm specifically thinking about this show and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, have sort of done some world building where, like, sort of organizations like the Black Widows or the Dora Milaje or whatever they're called, you know, the Black Widow, the Black Panther.
Oh, the Dora Milaje, right?
Yeah. What did you say?
The Dora Milaje, I think.
Dora Milaje, or something like that. Yeah, I kind of like how both shows have sort of built up that the universe a little bit and made those organizations sort of feel like a part of the universe of the show or of the MCU. And I'm trying to think what else happened in this episode. I did like that that when Clint went and to the memorial for the Avengers or whatever, that plaque on the wall, and he sort of had that moment about Natasha. I thought that was a good moment. In this show, someone made a comment on Reddit how they felt this show kind of has been sort of almost a function as a eulogy for Black Widow that the movies didn't really do at all. So I kind of I would agree with that. I think it is sort of functioning that way. Like she dies in Endgame sort of almost really abruptly. I don't really think in that instance you really have a time to really register what happened very well, but this is helping with that. So
yeah, actually, you know, that's a really good point, because I didn't really think about it until now. But like the end of Endgame, there's a huge funeral that's held for Tony, but not for Natasha. Like it's because Tony died that everyone gathers together to mourn his loss, you know, or that he's gone. And Natasha's brought up, you know, people recognize that Natasha also died, but that's not what the funeral's about. That's not everyone's there to gather and mourn over. It's over the fact that Tony died, not Natasha.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, in a way too, I don't think Natasha would really want that. And I think Tony was more of a public personality, maybe more than, not that Black Widow wasn't, but I think Tony, I would imagine it was probably a little bit more well known because he's sort of a larger than life personality, but just by Natasha's nature and her job, she was more kind of a black ops sort of person.
Right.
But she was in Congress several times, so it's not like she wasn't
known.
Yeah, I mean, she was an Avenger. So she was probably one of the most famous people on Earth. But when we do see her gravestone, it is sort of in this, somewhere in the Midwest. It didn't really look like it was well frequented or anything, kind of look abandoned.
Right. Or somewhere private, to say the least.
Yeah.
But, which actually, shoot, now I'm trying to remember what I was trying to say. Shoot, I had a thought. It's gone.
Yeah. Well, I thought maybe we could end out this portion of the video just talking a little bit about the build up to Kingpin and just sort of what you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, so in our conversations on the podcast talking about how episode 5 was kind of supposed to be like the big pop off for this show in particular, I think the pop off might have been a little overplayed. Like this felt like more of a whimper versus a bang. In terms of, like, I know that I personally was really excited to see that that, you know, I guess spoiler alert, if you're still here, what the fuck are you doing? But that the actor who plays Kingpin in the Netflix Daredevil series has been introduced officially by means of a photo in the show, to be Kingpin in Hawkeye, which now directly includes that character in the MCU now.
I do think Jeremy Renner really sold that line very well when he's like, that this is the guy that I've been worried about this entire time.
Yeah, right.
Like, that was really well sold.
That was a really great delivery, and I do think that the delivery of that, or like that information being delivered to us was really cool. I don't think the delivery was not as intense as I maybe would have expected with the hype that was built around episode 5, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like, it was a cool moment, certainly, but I don't think the whole series is going to be remembered for episode 5, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm hoping the show gets a second season for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it deserves it.
I would say so. I want Kate Bishop's character especially to be explored more, and for her to kind of be built up more.
Yeah, I'm really digging her character. I think that actress is really, really strong. Why am I drawing a blank on her name right now?
Wait for it.
She's been in a lot of things recently. She voiced Gwen in the Spider-Verse movies, and she also voiced the main character in that Arcane show.
Haley Steinfeld.
Yeah, that was a strong casting choice.
Yeah, I was not her biggest advocate early on. I definitely have spoke about her in a more negative context on the podcast previously. But as the show has gone on, I have begun to enjoy her character way more. Like, I think she is I think you're right. I think she's a really solid choice for the character of Kate Bishop. In that, like, I don't know enough about Kate Bishop in general from the comics to make much of a judgment there. But just in watching Hawkeye, I think she's done a really cool job of developing the character, and she's interesting. She's funny. Like, her clumsiness as a person, as juxtaposed to her excellence as an archer, is really funny. Like,
yeah, it's nice in these MCU movies and shows that the actors rarely ever just phone it in. And I think it's because they know these shows / movies are going to be watched.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, she's putting up a performance that I think is really going to be remembered and appreciated moving forward. And that's why I really hope there's another season of this, because I want to see more of her. I want her character to be developed more, because right now, like, she is still just kind of a Hawkeye fangirl in training. and I want her to stand more on her own 2 feet, and I really hope that we get a chance to see more of that moving forward. But that being said, we have a whole nother episode to talk about moving forward after next week's.
And next week's episode is supposed to be, this is probably including credits, but it's supposed to be almost an hour long. So
sure, okay.
I was actually thinking this in the last episode. I was enjoying the last episode so much, and the characters are all really interesting. They're even doing a good job of making her mother interesting, which that could be a very boring character if they Kate Bishop's mother, to be clear. I think this could have. I would be fine watching a full-blown MCU movie set with Hawkeye as the main character and dealing with the problems that he's having right now. I would totally be. I don't know if I would have said that for some of the other shows that have been on Disney Plus. So
yeah, I don't know. Like, it kind of depends on the characters. I mean, I I would agree with you only in that like I would almost like more shows versus movies in a lot of cases. Only because, you know, I complain about 6 episodes not being enough to like fully flesh out all the story. But we are getting like if you were to turn that the episodes into a movie, we would be getting like a 4 to 5 hour film, right? Versus a two to maybe 3 hour film if it were made into an actual like AAA budget film. And so if Hawkeye were a movie, we'd be getting way less in terms of character development and everything versus as a show we're getting quite a bit more in terms of character development and background, but it still feels like not enough. Like 6 episodes just doesn't feel like enough in terms of a show, but in terms of a movie, no one would go watch a 6 hour movie, right? So it's kind of a weird position to be in, um, but yeah, I want more. I want more Hawkeye. I want more Kate Bishop. And I want to see, I don't think we're going to get any actual like Kingpin action in this show. I think it's being set up for future stuff, but which I look forward to watching. I want Kingpin being introduced properly in a way that I can really get hyped about, but I don't think we're going to get it in this show.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of feel like the next episode, if it wasn't the finale, would be focused on Kingpin and who he is and where he's been. Because to me, and I guess we can kind of move into the next topic here and finish out the video after this, but
yeah,
to me, it almost feels like they're not saying the Netflix shows didn't happen. There's nothing in what we've seen so far in, I guess, Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man movie, or Hawkeye to say that what happened in Daredevil on Netflix didn't actually happen in the MCU. There's nothing that's contradicting it so far. In fact, I guess a lot of it is supporting that it's still canon with the Netflix shows. Just with, and full disclosure, I only watched the first season of Daredevil, but apparently it's in a Daredevil season 3. Daredevil beats the crap out of Kingpin and cripples him essentially. So the fact that has a cane now and is wearing a white suit, which apparently he also put on the white suit at the end of Daredevil season 3, almost supports that he is still that Daredevil. And apparently also the hotel he is in currently is also from the Daredevil TV show. So it sort of supports that is still part of canon if you choose to see it that way.
And I think which yeah, you're right, that does lead us to an important discussion about like what Netflix shows are going to be relevant to the MCU moving forward, because and what parts of what Netflix shows are going to be made canon, right? Because like in talking about Daredevil, if you're going to make Daredevil as a show, all seasons of it being made canon, you're faced with an interesting dilemma of how much is canon, because like my initial thought right off the top of my head was Punisher, like that actor being introduced as Punisher into the MCU, like whether that would be a thing. But it also brings in like the whole of the Defenders, being a part of the MCU. And so I guess now we're probably going to move into this part of the episode, which is discussing like who do we think is going to make the short list? Is there going to be a short list? Do all of them deserve to be? Do all of the Netflix actors who've participated in Marvel related shows, do they all deserve to move forward? Should they all move forward? How do fans of the series, feel about that? And just kind of the implications of those decisions. So
yeah, and I will say too that Spider-Man, if anything, says everything that has happened is canon. and we're talking about all the Fox movies, all the Sony movies. They're all canon. Even the Universal Hulk movies, they're all canon. But they might be set in another branch of the multiverse. And that was pretty much confirmed by Spider-Man. So, which I mean, if you watch the trailers, you know, right? Like, you know,
right? Yeah, like like Willem Dafoe and company, like, are all clearly have not been introduced traditionally into the MCU. They've all been from previous films.
But we also have J. Jonah Jameson, played by the same actor as Raimi's Spider-Man movies. Trying to blank on his name right now, but he's just, in that case, he's a different person than what was in Raimi's movies, but he is like he's still like a different version of the same character played by the same actor. So there's nothing really saying that isn't the case with these Netflix shows either. We don't really know.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really wild and really cool about bringing in multiverse stuff, because like you could bring in Robert Downey Jr. again as Iron Man, but from a different universe, right? Like he could fully well have films being made about him still, but just it's a different universe.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of feel, well, I don't want to get into this because it will be spoilers for Spider-Man, but never mind.
Yeah, like there's a lot of characters that could be not reevaluated, like reapproached, I guess would be the phrase I'd use. That like aren't alive or haven't been introduced yet. Because it does beg the question, like, okay, well, Spider-Man was technically around kind of during the Avengers movie, so why wasn't Spider-Man helping the Avengers? This kind of answers some of those questions. It's not like the best example, in the real world, we know it's licensing and all of that bullshit, but like that's a boring reason to give for a boring and inane reason to give why certain characters weren't present during certain moments in certain movies. And so in that we have the multiverse as an option now, we have so many more options to move into as to like why certain characters weren't there. Well, why weren't the X-Men helping during the Avengers conflict? Well, because they were in a different universe, bruv. And so now we get to introduce these characters without a lot of the awkward questions of like, well, why weren't they here during this time?
I mean,
they're heroes.
And in Eternals, they actually discussed that in the actual movie too. So
yeah. Right, yeah, because I mean, for them, it was mostly because they're not supposed to get involved, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They certainly don't have a problem getting involved in other reasons. The Eternals, to me, is an annoying reason to prove that, because it's like, oh, they don't want to get involved. Well, they certainly didn't seem to have a problem getting involved when the Earth was going to blow up because of a celestial. Whatever.
Well, I think that's how they explain it. They could only interfere if it involved like whatever those creatures were called. I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, the
deviants. They can only get involved with the deviants were involved, apparently.
Brief aside, I am a little annoyed that we have two different Marvel properties that are using deviant in different forms. In Loki, people who travel through time and who shouldn't be are called deviants. And then we also have Celestials. These monsters are called deviants. Clearly, there was some miscommunication there on the use of this phrase to refer to different characters.
So the word is being used in a different context.
Yeah, but
different version of. But I see what you're saying, though.
It's confusing. It's needlessly confusing. Like there are so many different phrases that can be used. Like those monsters from Eternals did not need to be called deviants.
Well, that's what they call them in the comics. If anything, I think that they should have changed the name in Loki.
Fine, then by all means, time deviants. Add on a time, add time to the beginning of that name, and then you're out of the frying pan. But like in the case that we have now, we have two different groups of people called deviants. They're not people necessarily, but groups called deviants. Just needlessly complicated. Anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, how about this? So I'm just gonna run through some actors that appeared in the Netflix shows, Marvel shows, and you can tell me whether you think they should cross over or not. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll divvy it up a little bit more. We'll do like a for sure, a maybe, and a hell no.
Okay. All right, starting off. Mike Coulter's Luke Cage.
That's a solid hell yeah. Yeah. I think Luke Cage needs to be represented properly in the MCU. Like, I think Mike Coulter did a really good job playing Luke Cage in the series. I recently have been getting back into Halo as a series, as an aside. Mike Coulter played a Spartan in Halo 5, which is not a game that is received very well, and that makes sense given the amount of time it took me to complete that campaign. But I enjoy him as an actor. I really enjoyed him in Luke Cage, and I think Luke Cage was a good show. So yeah, I definitely think he should be brought forward. I think, if anything, with the passing of Chadwick Boseman, we need more like strong Black actors in the MCU, just for like the sake of diversity. Like, we can't just have a whitewashed cast of actors that are playing all the most famous heroes. And I think it's really awesome that we have Luke Cage that can be brought forward. And Mike Coulter's already been in the role, so why not bring him forward? He did a great job, and I think it'd be really cool to bring him forward.
All right. Sean Bernthal as Frank Castle / the Punisher.
That is also another. Okay, I'm going to go with a maybe on this one. I think he was a really good Punisher actor. I enjoyed him in his stints in the Daredevil series. But if I'm 100% honest, I have not watched season 1 of Punisher through Netflix. My wife and I made an attempt to watch this show, and we just got kind of bored. And I think it's more of the character itself, just the Punisher in general, that led me to not being super interested in that show in general, and just maybe in the character in general. Needlessly violent characters, especially by means of gun violence, is not a character I'm necessarily super interested in, at least in the context of Marvel superheroes. So that being said, I think overall it's a hell yes. For me personally, it's a maybe. I think he did a good job, but he just didn't deliver a performance that I found that captivating enough to keep my interest.
Yeah, I guess I never really watched that show either. I didn't watch Daredevil season 2, which he was introduced in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, he's a fine actor, but he can play pretty intense roles well. I think he'd be fine. I think they should bring him back, probably.
Yeah, I think, like, just in terms of, like, he's already there, poised as the character. Like, I think Marvel and Disney in general would be stupid not to bring him forward, because they have no reason not to bring him forward outside of the violent nature of what the Punisher is. But yeah, like, just for me personally, the Punisher is not a character that vibes very well with me, but I do think that he, as the actor, deserves to be brought forward just for his acting chops alone.
Yeah, how I know this guy the best was from season 1 of The Walking Dead, where I believe he played a character called Shane.
Yeah, he was Rick's best friend.
Yeah. And there's a quote that always gets associated with him, and I can't remember what it is. But I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, what do we got next? You might not even remember this person, but I remember her on season 1 of Daredevil. Jerry Hogarth. She played a lawyer, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, who you probably know from the Matrix movies.
Oh yes, no, yeah, she played Trinity,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
As far as characters moving forward, um, off the top of my head, I don't know if she has a larger role to play in terms of like representing a hero or villain from Marvel Comics. Um, that being said, I mean, she's a fantastic actress. So I would say she's worth bringing forward just for that reason alone. Um, Based off my knowledge of her, I think she's more of a maybe, but I think just in terms of like her appeal as an actress, she would 100% be worth bringing forward.
Sorry, I should put myself on mute here. The dog's really going at the water bowl right now.
You're cool.
Kristen Ritter as Jessica Jones.
That is a solid hell yes. I loved her in Jessica Jones season 1 to 2. She's a fantastic actress. Jessica Jones is definitely one of those characters that, like, I kind of put her in the same camp as like Constantine a little bit, in terms of like, she's not really a good person. She does her best to be a good person, but that's what makes her so interesting as a superhero. And that kind of seems to be the motif of the Defenders versus the Avengers. Like, the Avengers are all kind of solidly good people for the most part, whereas the Defenders have a lot of character flaws. And but Kristen Ritter did such a great job as Jessica Jones. I loved season 1 of Jessica Jones. That was so good. And maybe that's tainted partially by the fact that David Tennant was the main villain in that series for a long time. Which he was a fantastic villain in that. But yeah, Kristen Ritter as Jessica Jones for sure. Like, she 100% should be brought forward. Like, I think a lot of people who are aware of these shows would agree that like Charlie Cox as Daredevil, like, should 100% be brought forward just in like his passion for the character and the life he brought to that role. And I think Jessica Jones stands as a very close second. Kristen Ritter just did such a good job.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll be happy to know that indeed Charlie Cox is back as Daredevil. So.
Yes, yeah, that one is. I've known that through spoilers. So
I'll just skip that. It still doesn't take away from the amazing moment where you actually get to see it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these I'm skipping over because I'm not really familiar with them. There's a few you might recognize their names. Like, I don't really know who Mercedes Misty Knight is. I think she's on the Luke Cage show and she's on Iron Fist and the Defenders.
Oh yeah, no, no, I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, I would say she'd be a really solid choice to bring forward too. If I'm going to be a solid advocate of Luke Cage bringing forward, I think Misty Knight bringing her forward is a really solid choice too. Like, she's a really interesting and well-developed character in the show. And again, like, she did a really good job bringing that character to life. I think that would be a really good choice.
What about Elektra, played by Elodie Young?
That one is a solid maybe to like maybe not choice for me, but that's more of my personal like, I don't really like Elektra in general, but that's mostly just from my exposure to the Netflix shows.
You don't like Jennifer Gardner's portrayal?
No, I hate her portrayal even more. Like, at least Elodie Young like brought a more interesting take, I guess, to the character. But like in general, I just don't like Elektra so much. And I think it's more of just like she's never used as much more beyond Daredevil's love interest. And maybe that's my reasoning for it. Like in how she's been presented to me as a person who watched the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie and in watching the Daredevil seasons on Netflix, um, Elektra seems like just more of a Daredevil's main squeeze versus like a full-fledged character. And so to me, it seems like she's just more of a, she could be played by anyone, because I don't necessarily think she brought that much to the character. But that's mostly because I don't know how much there is to this character outside of her being associated with Daredevil.
Gotcha. All right. What about Foggy, played by Eldon Henson, which was Matt Murdock's partner in law?
This is kind of a tough one, because I actually really enjoy Foggy as a character in the Netflix series. How necessary he is in the series moving forward. If Daredevil were to get their own movie, if Charlie Cox were to have a Daredevil film made in the MCU, then Foggy would be a 100% must have.
This is okay. I just want to point this out before we move on, because this is kind of like throwing me for a loop right now.
Sure.
But he's from that actor is from the original Mighty Ducks.
Yes, from years and years ago.
Yeah. And he actually appeared in that new Mighty Ducks show on Disney Plus that I watched through. I did not make the connection that that was the same guy.
The same guy, really?
Anyway.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
No, I thought he did a good job in the show. I think part of the problem with bringing characters forward, the side characters from some of the Netflix shows, is that not all of them are super necessary narratively speaking. Because I think in the Netflix shows, there are some of those characters that are brought in more just to pad episode length than they are to actually bring any sort of like narrative to the show.
Well, the rumors have it that indeed Foggy and, well, the next
Karen.
actress that we'll talk about, Karen Page, Deborah Ann Woll, that they will both be brought into the She-Hulk show that's coming out next year.
Okay. If that's the case, then I'm glad. My choice for both of them would have been solid maybes, not because of their portrayals of the characters, but more of just like how much sense it would make to bring them forward for narrative reasons.
Well, let's move on to a more controversial one. How about Danny Rand?
Oh, fuck no. I hate Iron Fist. I hated that character so much in the Netflix show. I found him insufferable. I think actually Finn Jones, I think, is a good actor. I just think that show was terrible, personally. But yeah, that to me, that's a solid no. Like, if we're gonna have a martial arts master, like, let's just focus on on like God, what was the movie that just came out?
Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi, thank you. Yeah, like Shang-Chi, I think would be a much better choice if we're gonna have a martial arts character in the MCU than Iron Fist for 100%.
Yeah. Well, getting down sort of to the bottom here, I'm just gonna skip over a few. Stick by Scott Glenn. He's like a side character to the max. We got Claire Temple, who is played by Rosario Dawson, who is playing Ahsoka these days, I believe. So
okay, Scott Glenn is stick, whatever. Quite frankly, I don't care. Like, I think I liked him in the show. He was fine, but like, do I think he's 100% necessary? No. He was in the show more as a connection to like another big bad group than he was as like a main character. He trained, let's see, did he train Daredevil or did he train Elektra or did he train both? It's been so long since I've watched either.
I believe he trained Daredevil, if I'm remembering from season 1.
Rosaria Dawson, on the other hand, I think she would be a good choice for a couple of reasons. One, she's had connections to all of the other Defenders. And she is, in and of herself, like Claire Temple is another character from Marvel Comics that, like, I don't know enough, a ton enough to, like, make a solid call in terms of how well she represents the character. But she is in reference to a character called Night Nurse from the comics. That, in addition to her connection to Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and Luke Cage, I think makes her, she's in connection to all of them. So I think she's kind of a home run of a choice, in my personal opinion.
And then the last one I'd have, I guess I'll throw it out there. Patricia Walker is Hellcat, played by, Rachel Taylor. I believe she was like
oh yeah, she's Jessica Jones's best friend.
Yeah, it kind of goes off the rails, I think.
Right? Yeah. She kind of turns into a bit of a junkie there for a while.
And also, I guess her first film, you're never gonna believe this. This is Rachel Taylor. It was Man Thing.
Man Thing?
Yeah, they made a Man Thing movie, an Australian-American monster film based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name. We had a whole big conversation about it.
I don't remember that at all.
Really? It's like Marvel's version of Swamp Thing, but it's
yeah. Oh, right.
Thing.
Man Thing versus oh dear God in heaven.
I mean, technically, after Spider-Man, that's technically canon to the MCU these days too.
Oh God. I'm gonna leave her as a solid maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't love her, nor did I hate her from the Jessica Jones Netflix series. I think she's a fine actress. I don't think she's amazing, but I think she's serviceable enough. How necessary it is to bring her forward into future narratives with Jessica Jones outside of like her own personal narrative. Yeah, I don't see how important she would be. If she gets the opportunity, dope. If not, well, I'm probably not going to shed many tears, if any.
I can just imagine they announce a different Hellcat and you're just like, oh.
I'd shed one tear, exactly one tear, and I'd be like, okay, that's enough of that.
She was just the perfect actress for that role.
But I don't know, like, how have you felt about a lot of these actors and actresses we've talked about? I mean, do you have any hot takes that differ from my own?
Not really, to be honest with you. Not really, to be honest with you. I don't have that connection to these shows that I think a lot of people do. I did like Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio in those roles, so I'm happy that they're gonna carry into the MCU at large. I mean, they always technically were, but it's nice to see that it's confirmed by the man on top, which in this case is not Kingpin, but Foggy.
Yeah.
I would like to see Kristen Ritter brought in for sure. I think she's a great choice. I think Luke Cage and Finn Jones are fine to be brought in. I don't have any negative feelings about Iron Fist because I never watched it. I know we've talked about that before. So
Yeah.
honestly, I'm fine with that all. If they want to bring in all the actors from the shows that are available, I say go ahead. I am kind of I would kind of like to see if there's any way that they could incorporate some of the other Marvel shows in, like Agents of Shields, or even some of the other even kind of weirder ones like the Runaways, or what's that other one? There's another one they made. It's about this couple. Anyway, but yeah, some of the kind of weirder shows, it'd be kind of been interesting to see if they could incorporate those as well. So
Yeah. I mean, with the inclusion of Charlie Cox and then what was his name? Vincent
D'Onofrio.
D'Onofrio. Yeah, like that does open a lot of doors for people to possibly enter into the MCU. I won't ask for any specifics regarding Spider-Man in No Way Home because we get confirmation of Charlie Cox, I'm sure, in that movie based on some of the mild hints you've given. And just from some of the spoiler images that have been provided by means of the interwebs. But it does beg the question of like Venom moving forward, and Carnage, for example.
That is also, you'll find out. I'll say that.
Okay, so it is mildly addressed, which does kind of confirm anything I'm thinking or talking about. So
yeah, and the show I was thinking about was called Cloak and Dagger.
Oh, right, Cloak and Dagger. I forgot about that. That's a show I should probably spend some time watching as well, just because it's there. But interesting. Okay. Well, that's all my thoughts personally. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of covering.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the Doctor Strange movie coming out next May. I think.
Yeah,
that's gonna be sort of an insane. It's gonna be a multiverse of madness, one might say. But yeah, I think that movie is gonna have a lot of weird stuff in it.
Yes, I fully hope so. Like, I want it to live up to the name of Multiverse of Madness. This shit better be crazy, because with what we've seen already, like from just shows that have, none of these other shows we've watched have had madness in the title, and they've been pretty fucking bananas. So if you have madness in your title, then I really hope. Yeah, you better be mad. Better be crazy.
Like, mania. Madness.
I want to feel like the Mad Hatter after having seen these movies. So,
I mean, some of the rumors coming out of that film are crazy. So I hope they're true.
Oh man, see, yeah, I try and stay away from spoilers like that if I can, only for the sake of having the full enjoyment going in. But
I definitely, even though I spoiled myself for pretty much all of Spider-Man, I still enjoyed it. For like, there was never a time I think where I was disappointed I hadn't spoiled myself on something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's some of this stuff has been so obvious, like from the point of view of a person who like has kind of been paying attention to spoilerish type stuff moving forward, who hasn't seen Spider-Man yet. Like, if Willem Dafoe is in this fucking movie, like, and Alfred Molina is in this movie, like, just those two actors alone, like, it would be really wild for Tobey Maguire to not be there, for example. Like, so, like, is it possible for him to not be there? Sure. But, like, why would you bother bringing those actors forward if you weren't going to also bring the Spider-Man that they faced, you know? So, like, that's a thing that I can just extrapolate from there. that I just think that it would be kind of insane to not take that opportunity. Like Spider-Verse is already a movie that exists. It might be animated, but it still brings forth the idea of, well, what if this character was there? So
Yeah,
I'm really excited to see.
They did a really good job incorporating, I think, the multiverse characters into the film in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense entirely. I mean, a lot of it's hand waved a lot, which it's fine.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Yeah.
But as far as the context of respecting what's come before, not even in the MCU, I mean, specifically not in the MCU, they did a really good job of respecting the universes that the villains have come from. Yeah.
Oh, so excited. I'm so excited to see this movie. I'm a big I'm a huge Iron Man stan at this point.
Iron Stan.
But before being a big Iron Man fan, Spider-Man was my favorite. And so
I think this movie does a really good job of representing that character accurately. Which
I'm just so excited to see this movie for that reason. Like Spider-Man might not necessarily be my number one pick anymore, but I am a huge fan of the character still. So I'm looking forward to seeing this and seeing exactly what it has to bring to the MCU at large. So
I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Certainly hope not. I better not be. Anger.
I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to Kevin Feige.
Strongly worded letter to Kevin Feige. Dear Mr. Feige, I'm sure you'll be disappointed to hear I did not enjoy your film.
I remember, we'll end this soon, but I remember we got a letter from when I worked at a banking institution. We got a letter in the mail, and it was addressed from the desk of blank, it was like that.
From the desk of blank.
Yeah, whatever the person's name was. So
I love that. That's a person who is I'm important enough.
Yeah.
The desk clerk formerly known as Bob.
I think that's kind of classy.
From the desk of. Oh, it's amazing. But anywho, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering all of our topics today. Do you have any closing thoughts there, Mr. Nick?
I guess I'm just excited for next week's episode. That's what I got.
We'll figure out the timing on recording the next episode. I will see Spider-Man soon.
I guess what I mean, not that I'm not excited for Nerds of the North, next week's episode of Hawkeye. Not that it matters. And
no, I mean, I'm more excited for next week's episode of Nerds of the North. Thank you very much, quite frankly.
Yeah, what's going to happen? We're going to leave this thing on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, we're just going to end it right. That's when the episode closes. No, with that being said, I think we've done a good job covering all of our topics today. And we do look forward to next week's episode, both of Hawkeye and for Nerds of the North, and then also in our discussion for Spider-Man No Way Home.
Maybe possibly The Matrix 4.
Ooh, yes, we should totally watch and discuss that, because I've had strong opinions on the Morpheus thing, and so I'd be remiss to not watch this movie.
I'm pretty sure it comes out next week.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it comes out Christmas week. So we should definitely have a discussion, because I want to see what our opinions are. But that being said, want to thank you all for joining us this evening for this episode of the Nerds of the North podcast. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or concerns, leave them down below. We would love to hear feedback on these episodes and things we could be doing differently to improve things. We know certainly there are things we could be doing to improve things. on background point, but maybe points that you think we should be bringing up more in the episodes, or things that we should discuss more thoroughly. Whatever you have in terms of criticism, we gladly welcome it. So
we want you guys to turn up the camera correction on your faces to max level.
yeah, I mean, God knows we both need it. I mean, for the love of God. No, but yeah, thank you all for watching and listening to this episode, and we hope you all have a great week, and we will talk to you in next week's episode. Have a good week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.